So if you're in the beauty world, or even just thinking about it, you've probably seen the scary headlines flying around online. There's this idea that a massive industry-wide shutdown is coming. But what's actually going on? Okay, let's get into it.
This is pretty much where it all blew up. A post like this one on Reddit went completely viral. And I mean, the headline is terrifying, right? 92% of beauty schools are going to close. That single claim sent a huge wave of panic through students, schools, you name it. It's a jaw-dropping number, for sure. But whenever you see a statistic that extreme, you kind of have to stop and ask, is that the real story? So let's peel back the layers and get to the facts behind all the fear.
First things first, where did this whole story even come from? And more importantly, what about that giant number at the center of it all? Where in the world did 92% come from?
Okay, so the 92.5% number, it's real. But, and this is a huge but, it's been taken completely out of context. It does not mean that 92.5% of schools are going to close. What it actually means is that 92.5% of cosmetology students are in programs where graduates don't end up earning more than someone with just a high school diploma. See the difference? It's a stat about student outcomes, not a prediction of schools shutting down.
And that 2027 deadline everyone was freaking out about? Yeah, that's wrong too. The real official timeline shows this is a much slower process. The new rule kicks in mid-2026, but schools won't even get their first warning notice until early 2027. To actually lose federal aid, a school has to fail the test twice. So the absolute earliest any school could lose that funding is July 2028, not 2027.
All right, so we know the big number is misleading, and the date is just plain wrong. So let's put that original viral claim under a microscope, piece by piece, and see how it really holds up.
So here's the verdict. That claim, 92% of schools will close, totally misleading. The 2027 deadline, incorrect. But the part about graduates needing to earn more than high school grads, that part is actually accurate. That's the whole point of this new rule. And failing twice, leading to a loss of aid, that's kind of true, but it's not the whole story. Programs lose access to federal student loans first, not just all their funding at once.
Okay, now that we've busted some of the myths, let's dig into the rule that's actually causing all this commotion. What exactly is this new earnings test?
It's called the A-Head Earnings Premium Test. And honestly, the logic behind it is pretty simple. The government is basically saying, hey, if we're giving out federal loans for students to attend these career programs, those programs should lead to a better paycheck than you'd get with just a high school diploma. If the typical graduate isn't making more, then they start to question if it's a good return on investment for students and for taxpayers.
Now, this is super important. It's not a one-strike-and-you're-out situation. It's not a sudden death sentence. It's a process. A program has to fail the test, and then it has to fail again within the next 2 years. Only then does it lose access to federal loans. The whole school is only at risk if the vast majority of its business is tied up in these failing programs. So there are chances to course correct.
This all leads to a really big question, though. Why are so many programs, we're talking over 90%, in danger of failing this test in the first place? Well, the answer is kind of baked into the economics of the entire beauty industry.
And here it is. This is the heart of the problem. The median, or typical pay for a cosmetologist, is about 35 grand a year. But the benchmark they're being measured against, a high school grad in their prime working years, is making over 50,000. That is a huge gap. And that simple, brutal math is why so many programs are at risk.
And here's why that earnings gap is so dangerous for students. The schools that can accept federal financial aid, they're called Title IV schools, well, they can charge way more for tuition. We're talking $15,000, $20,000. But schools that don't take that aid, they often charge a tiny fraction of that. This dependence on federal loans has created a debt trap. High tuition means high debt, and that debt is almost impossible to pay off on a typical cosmetologist's salary.
But what if there was another way to do things? What if a school could thrive without even touching that federal aid system? Let's take a look at a real-world example.
I mean, just look at this. It's like night and day. On one side, you have the typical school with super high tuition and a mountain of debt for its students. And on the other, you have a place like Louisville Beauty Academy. Their tuition is less than half the average. Students graduate with zero debt, and the results, like passing the state exam and getting a job, are way better.
So what's their secret sauce? How do they do it? It's actually shockingly simple. They just don't take part in the federal student aid program. By opting out, they are completely immune to all these new rules. Their entire business is built on keeping costs low and getting great results for their students, not on getting federal loan money. They've basically sidestepped this whole crisis.
So, look, this whole situation is complicated. It's not the 92% apocalypse that the viral posts screamed about, but it is a massive shakeup for the industry. So what does this all mean for you? Let's get into some practical advice.
If you're a student or you're thinking about becoming one, listen up. First, keep an eye out for the new lower earnings warning on the FAFSA application. That's a major red flag. Really focus on schools with lower tuition and a track record of good results. And you should know, if your school does get into trouble, there are protections to make sure you can finish your program. And finally, think about specializing in higher-paying areas, like medical aesthetics, right from the start.
And for the schools themselves, the writing is on the wall. They need to get real about what their graduates are actually earning, and they need to do it now. That means cutting tuition to help students avoid debt, adding programs in fields that pay better, and seriously asking themselves if being dependent on federal aid is a smart plan for the future.
You know, this whole thing isn't just about some new government regulation. It's really a moment of truth for the entire beauty education industry. The old way of doing things, piling on debt for a job with modest pay, it's just not working anymore. And that leaves us with one critical question. As the industry figures out its next move, is the future of beauty education going to be one that's completely debt-free?